Cubs coach Frank Falzon is intent on sculpting his players into the leanest, meanest, fittest 15 athletes in the territory. The Singapore competition allows each of its 10 teams 5 imports. Club officials say the Cubs have scored well.
First class. We couldn't have hoped for better. We've got boys like Joe Barbaro who play with Adelaide City, of which 6 of the Socceroos come from.
Oh man, that's the best idea we had, you know. Like, we've got the players here, but you know, not enough experience sort of thing, you know. I reckon these 5 players will really help us out, you know.
A lavishly talented striker, it's hoped Barbaro will fire up front. Despite the team's in-your-face training methods, it's hoped next month's trip to Bali will meld the team into a cohesive unit.
This trip to Bali is really going to make us into a family, which is very important when you come to soccer, because you're not going to always have good times, you're going to have some bad times.
The Cubs play 2 games in Bali, then play an exhibition match in Darwin against a Singapore side. Although officials don't want to raise expectations too high, it's thought the Cubs side could be competitive enough to finish its first Singapore season in the top 4. Their publicly stated goal is to become the fittest athletes ever to represent the territory. Sports scientist Steve Seaman's job is to make sure that happens.
Well, they've got to understand how different methods of training are used and the effects it has on their bodies.
Old-fashioned blood, sweat and tears, plus high-tech training methods including constant heart rate monitoring and video analysis. Surprisingly, that preparation has never before been used for a territory sports team. The expert says that's because never before has a territory team shown such dedication.
So I think we're going to be able to tie together the technology from sports science with the dedication of these players to go to one focus, improving their performance in one sport.
In Bali, the players face 5 hours intensive training each day, plus 3 exhibition matches.
Say 80% work and 20% fun. We're there mainly to train and train hard.
The Cubs' training base is the world-famous Kuta, its bustling streets and surf beach the scene for the week-long intensive training camp. Although surrounded by international holiday makers, the camp has been no vacation for the players.
Stretch the muscles, think about relax, but stay switched on here.
But it's more a cultural change, to be able to adapt to the Asian region, the foods, the communication, the sights and sounds, and feel comfortable in our environment.
The team has also played trial matches against 3 of Bali's top teams. The Cubs didn't have too many problems defeating their opponents, winning 4-1, 2-0 and 3-0. The game's invaluable as the team works towards its first league match in Singapore on the 26th of March.
Yeah, it's a good experience. Climate, different conditions. I mean, the grass is 6 inches high over here. We're adapting. It's good fun.
I think by kick-off time we'll be ready.
The Cubs' preparation continues when they return to Darwin with a trial match against Singapore B at Marara on the 28th of December. But the training camp did have some rewards, allowing the players time for the more traditional tourist pursuits Bali has to offer.
Oh, it's the life, isn't it?
Anthony Flannery, 8 National News.
Unfazed by torrential rain, the Cubs signalled their brazenly aggressive intentions from the outset. Singapore B's attacking efforts consistently met a brick wall in goalie Mark Baker. Neat passing by the Cubs pressured Singapore, a mistake by goalie Stephen Ning presenting Andy Reid with an open goal and first blood. The visitors tightened their defence, but an equaliser proved elusive. The Cubs always looked dangerous. Their only blemish came when Michael McPhillis gave away a penalty in front of goal. Amran Asti converted for Singapore's only assault on the scoreboard.
And we punish them. It's as simple as that.
Although individual players, notably Andy Reid, performed brilliantly for the Cubs, the all-round team effort points to a formidable assault on the Singapore competition.
we're not going to have any problems in playing against that sort of style of soccer. And also, we're not going there to make up the numbers. We're going there to take out the league out for them.
The West Adelaide Sharks arrived at Darwin Airport this afternoon at full strength for tomorrow night's clash against the Cubs.
We came here with the best team. It's everybody here. There's nobody missing.
The Sharks are one of the better sides in the National Soccer League, boasting 4 former Australian players and current Socceroo Stan Lazardis. Though the Sharks are favourite, the Cubs are slowly gaining respect.
Players from all over Australia are going to this club, so, I mean, there must be something happening here.
With the Cubs' first game in the Singapore League just 6 weeks away, tomorrow's match should provide valuable experience for the newly formed Cubs. Negotiations are also underway for another 2 matches against a Malaysian side within the next month. Though the Cubs lack match fitness, they'll go in against West Adelaide with plenty of enthusiasm.
The team's confident, we've been training very hard, and I think we should get a good result against them.
The match kicks off at 6 p.m. tomorrow at Marara. Paul McLaughlin, 8 National News. The Darwin Cubs, playing in the white strip, needed some strong competition to prepare for the Singapore League. They found that in the red-hot West Adelaide side that dazzled the locals, scoring 5 goals in the first half. Greg Brown put up a well-placed cross. George Hanyotis in perfect position to bang in the first goal of the match. Less than 10 minutes later, Greg Brown had the radar switched on, this from a penalty. The Cubs had a few chances. Nick Politis went close, but the Sharks had too much class, scoring another 3 goals before half-time. The Cubs improved after the break. Luis Rodriguez took on all comers before firing one in. Nick Politis did well to finish off, giving the Cubs their only goal of the match. A 5-1 victory to the Sharks, the Cubs coming away with a valuable lesson from a champion side.
That's been our game plan, is to get good opposition so that we can test out our players, and they certainly gave us a run for our money last night.
The Cubs have just 6 weeks before the start of the Singapore competition. They'll be hoping for a better result against Sarawak in 10 days' time. Paul McLaughlin, 8 National News.
Right from the opening minutes, the Cubs in white went in search of the goals that would put the memory of the last game behind them. Not even the odd missing boot was going to stop them from keeping up the pressure. At times, the Sarawak defence adopted the showbiz approach. Spectacular, but not all that effective. Finally, the visitors worked their way into scoring position, but the Cubs won the battle of the heads. The local side was just as productive a little closer to the ground. Sarawak had little success close in, so a more long-distance approach was adopted. John Hunter earned a yellow card for this tackle, and it proved to be an expensive offence. From the free kick, the ball was fed to Joe Barbaro. The visitors weren't without their chances, but more often than not, the ball found the rain clouds instead of the net. The 1-0 half-time scoreline meant it was still very much anyone's game until Barbaro bagged his double. Still, Sarawak weren't even getting close to scoring, the job getting more difficult by the minute. But a header from Manuel Lolius sealed a useful win for the Cubs, undoing some of the damage of the previous game.
We pushed the ball around a lot better. We looked a lot more relaxed than the first game.
Sarawak will be out to reverse the result at Marara tomorrow. Peter Adamson, 8 National News. Right from the start, the Cubs looked good. A great solo effort by Luis Rodriguez looked even better. The Cubs were quick to pounce on any mistakes, and team president Nick Metros was happy with how his side had performed.
Very worthwhile, strong opposition, showing that our team has come to its own.
The Cubs continued to build on their 2-0 half-time lead, but then the drama started midway through the second half. The referee's attention was drawn to this incident at the top right of the screen. It was a second yellow card offence. That meant banishment, and that's when the problem started.
The rule actually says that he must go outside of the field, meaning outside of the fence. and the referee enforced that to the letter of the law, and there was a bit of a communication problem.
In fact, most seemed to be communicating, which was half the problem. The player refused to leave, so the signal went out, calling the other players off. That calmed down, but then the Sabah goalie wanted to have his say, leaving an undefended goal. Finally, cooler heads prevailed and the game went on. That's now all ancient history, and with the Cubs' first game on the 26th of this month, team officials are now applying the fine-tuning.
I guess Frank Falzon, our coach, will now be concentrating on maintaining fitness, maintaining skills and maintaining sharpness.
And the Cubs are continuing to get widespread exposure. Sports Sunday gave the team national exposure yesterday, and the Cubs aren't short of high-level support.
I'm told that the chairman of the Darwin Committee, Mr. Neville Rand, had kind things to say about us on radio also. It's certainly getting a lot of exposure.
Peter Adamson, 8 National News. With less than 48 hours until kick-off, there was no easing up at training last night. Months of talk and practice matches are about to give way to the real thing.
Even though we've got a fierce competition Saturday night, but we had some good results leading to this game, so I'm feeling very, very confident that we're going to do very, very well.
For the best part of 6 months, the side has been training for its entry into the Singapore League. But not even the best of preparation can stop some basic human emotions.
And the players are really G'd up. We can't wait. I mean, I'm sort of, last few days I've been getting butterflies.
The lead-up matches with the Singapore sides have revealed some of the basics of the Asian game. It's a different style of play to suit their size. So it'll be no surprise if the Cubs adopt a physical approach.
They seem to be a lot smaller in build and not quite, they just don't have the, well, what do you say, the Aussie toughness.
Aussie tough or not, the travel and playing in unusual surroundings will make it difficult for the Cubs first up. The Darwin side is counting on its fitness to give it the edge.
You know, I'm probably at the my peak fitness at the moment because we've been training for so long. You know, we've had 5-month build-up, and you know, I think we'll win our first game.
But all the preparation in the world is no substitute for actual match conditions. Team members admit their opponents are still very much unknown.
Depending on what sort of tactics they're going to employ, we'll work accordingly to those.
Peter Adamson, 8 National News.
Saturday night at Singapore's Jurong Town Stadium saw the start of a new chapter in Australian sport. The Darwin Cubs, the first Australian side to play in an international home and away competition. The Cubs dominated the game from the opening minute, Nick Politis scoring Darwin's first goal in the Singapore National League. Louis Rodriguez gave the visitors a 2-0 lead before half-time. The nightmare continued in the second half for Jurong Town. A Joe Barbaro goal soon followed by Politis' second for the match. The final score, Darwin Cubs 4, Jurong Town 0.
And tonight was one really special night that I'll never, ever going to forget. The best games that I've actually enjoyed in a long, long time.
Great start to the Singapore Premier League for the Darwin Cubs.
Despite the convincing scoreline, there are concerns about the Cubs' inability to finish off scoring chances.
And tonight was one really special night that I'll never, ever going to forget.
No worries, no panic about the finishing. It's just one of those games that, you know, not everything went in, but we're just still happy to get 4 on the board.
A much tougher test awaits the Cubs next week at Singapore's National Stadium when they meet one of the competition favourites, Tiong Bahru.
I think tactically, and we're going to have to just to be a bit more tuned in, fine-tuning.
Tiong Bahru is a much stronger side, and I think we're expecting a very strong competition next week.
We're just going to take game by game, you know, week by week. We've forgotten about this game. We're just back to training on Tuesday night and just start from there again.
Anthony Flannery, 8 National News, Singapore.
A crowd of about 2,000 welcomed the Cubs to international football. Their opponents, the Jurong Town Dragons, had their own fan club, but could have done with a few more numbers. The Cubs went straight on the offensive and were unlucky not to score several times in the first 10 minutes. Superior footwork saw the Darwin side constantly dancing around their hosts. Jurong goalie Mahmood Ibrahim was being stretched to the limits of exhaustion. But in the 15th minute, Nick Politis fired one that Ibrahim had no chance of deflecting. Attorney General Darryl Manzi and wife Maureen had plenty to smile about, especially when Luis Rodriguez fooled the defence. The Cubs led 2-0 at half-time. Second half goals to Joe Barbaro and Politis capped off a convincing win for Darwin. There might have been a 3-goal difference between the sides, but that didn't tell the whole story of the game. Unlike last week, the Cubs were more than matched for almost the entire first half before scoring just before the break.
Great effort, and credit has to go to the coach and the boys because it was a very tough game.
Another 2 goals followed in the second half, wrapping up the first part of the Cubs' overseas campaign. This Sunday, Darwin hosts its first game. But from all indications, the Cubs won't want to get complacent.
We've got some very tough games coming up. Balestier United this weekend are supposed to be a very physical, strong team. They've got 2 Croatian strikers, and they're going to give us a real run for our money.
So far, the Cubs have been fitter and more physical. But things could well change as the opposition develops tactics to counter the Australian style.
I believe that's what is going to happen. They're going to learn our style of football, and they're going to play to our style, and their fitness level will rise to our level, and the games are going to get harder from here on.
The Cubs are receiving plenty of publicity in Singapore. A spin-off of that will see a group of supporters heading down under this weekend.
Well, there's a contingent of 28 coming down this weekend, and I understand that the other clubs have organised even larger groups to come down, so there's going to be a mini invasion of Singaporean soccer fans.
Peter Adamson, 8 National News. The teams were given a musical welcome to Football Park. The home side then went on the attack right from the kick-off. The Cubs weren't wasting any time, and the game wasn't even 2 minutes old. But what the Cubs were wasting were opportunities. So far, the luck was well and truly on the side of the visitors. Still, the Cubs went on the attack. A goal seemed just a coat of paint away. But for all the opportunities, the Cubs still couldn't finish. The 0-0 scoreline was proving to be frustrating. Tony Gasparetto earned the attention of the referee and received a yellow card for his efforts. The Cubs' frustrations were really starting to show as Joe Barbaro incurred the wrath of officialdom for a yellow card of his own. To Ballestier's credit, they weren't panicking. The Cubs weren't getting things all their own way. Even in the dying stages, the Cubs failed to capitalise. 0-0 in a game Darwin should have won. Peter Adamson, National 9 News. Luck was definitely on Ballestier's side on Sunday. While it was the Cubs' own fault they didn't score, the sheer number of shots at goal should have seen at least one find the back of the net. But striker Joe Barbaro says the news isn't all bad.
Good sign was that we created the opportunities.
Finishing has been one of the Cubs' problems since entering the Singapore League. But Barbaro says that weakness sometimes overshadows the strengths of the side.
We haven't lost a game. We're the only team that hasn't got a goal against us. So, I mean, in that respect, we've got a great defence.
Singapore Armed Forces are reportedly a more physical side compared to some of the outfits the Cubs have faced. But even if they're able to match the Cubs in that department, Barbaro believes Darwin will still be superior.
We're a lot more skillful than they will be. Also, with that strength on the ball that we've got, it's hard for them to match us, really.
There's only one addition to the Cubs with the inclusion of Billy Mavros. And a slightly more polished Darwin outfit should come away with a win.
If we create the chances that we did last week, we're bound to score sooner or later, and we will score this week, definitely.
Peter Adamson, 8 National News. The Cubs couldn't have asked for a better start. Fumble from the Singapore goalie proved costly. That was to be the only goal of the game. The remainder of the contest got a little personal. The Cubs had a few more shots at goal, but nothing the scorers had to worry about. For a lot of the game, the referee also had to play the role of policeman, as the yellow card got a real workout. While the Cubs appeared to control a great part of the game, armed forces weren't without their chances. But still, relations between the sides were tense. The second half played out much the same as the first. The Singapore goalie put in an acrobatic performance, but even he wasn't above getting a little physical. On Sunday, the Cubs play host to Perth. It should be another tough encounter, with the West Australians winning their match on the weekend, 11 goals to 0. Peter Adamson, 8 National News. Last Saturday's outing against Singapore Armed Forces proved to be an eventful and somewhat bruising encounter. The Cubs came away with the points, but at a price.
It took its toll, and there are some players that won't be playing this weekend because of the physical style of last week's game.
The most notable omission will be key playmaker Tony Gasparetto. But on the plus side, the Cubs' ranks will be boosted by star Cameroon striker Cyril Keller, who has a pretty interesting assessment as to how he plays the game.
I play like an African. I love to play with the ball, and I enjoy it. You know, the ball is like a girlfriend to me.
Keller may have a close association with the football, but his services probably would have come in handy last weekend.
When I need to be aggressive, I become aggressive, but I'm very fair play.
The Cubs' form has generally been winning form, but Sunday's opponents, the Perth Kangaroos, have been putting in an even stronger performance.
The Perth Kangaroos will go in as the favourites, and the Darwin Cubs as the underdogs. It's going to be a real David and Goliath battle.
Sunday's game will start half an hour later at 4:30, after Ballister United complained about the heat a fortnight ago. And just to keep everyone guessing, the Cubs aren't expected to announce their starting lineup until Sunday morning.
This is the big one, and we're looking forward to it.
Peter Adamson, 8 National News. The opening stages were testing times, but no one was able to get a real advantage. Early attempts were little more than speculators. Perth's first set move started off impressively, but went nowhere. The Kangaroos were gaining the edge territorially, but so far the Cubs were up to the task. Darwin set up a few chances of their own, but with no success. One of the biggest near misses belonged to the Cubs. But down at the other end, it was a worrying time for the home side. Cub supporters were finding little time to relax, but with half-time looming, it was Paul McVital that caused the first real damage. Suddenly, things weren't looking good for the Cubs. They got even worse thanks to the boot of Steve Bourne. The game was probably lost at that stage, the Cubs going down, but perhaps better off for the experience. Peter Adamson, National 9 News. The Kangaroos looked in control of Sunday's game, so long as Keller kept his distance. On the ball, the Western Australians were totally confused by the Cameroon striker. Not a bad effort for someone struggling with the conditions.
There's too much humidity in the air, and it's not easy. It's not the same thing as in the south.
Developing tactics to neutralise Keller isn't easy. Even the strength of numbers is no guarantee. A striker, however, isn't much good unless he can also score goals. As Keller demonstrated on the weekend, he's more than capable in that department too.
Yeah, you must be happy, you know, wherever you go, whenever you score a goal, you must be happy, even if you score it with the hand, you know.
The Cubs may have been happy with Keller's efforts, but the end result was still defeat. Another loss will be unacceptable, so the team is approaching tomorrow's game with a military-like focus.
We can't afford to lose 2 games, so I think the boys are aware of it, and we are going there as a commando in a mission.
The Cubs have already had one particularly tough game in Singapore. Tomorrow's could be the toughest, as Geylang International have dominated the competition for the better part of a decade. The Cubs, however, plan to do some dominating of their own.
We are not going to lose, we are going to win, and we are going to do everything to win.
Peter Adamson, 8 National News. They might have been a long way from home, but the Cubs did have some support. The Cubs didn't need much more encouragement. The Gaylung goalie was having a tough time of it, and it soon got even tougher as Nick Politis made it 2-0. The Cubs were no longer the struggling side of recent weeks, but Politis says the team was always expecting a flat spot at some stage of the season.
We actually started training in October, getting ready for the Singapore season in January, and it got postponed to March, so our coach Frank has always told us, just expect a bit of a letdown.
The Cubs continued to spread the ball around as Andy Reid got a perfect bounce to make it 3-0. As the team demonstrated, they aren't forced to rely on just one or two key players.
Everybody's capable of scoring in the side. Now it's not relying on one or two players as in previous years and in local soccer.
Star recruit Cyril Keller almost set up goal number 4, but despite the brilliance from the Cameroon import, luck this time was against the Cubs. But Keller got his chance a short while later with a goal that looked almost too easy, proving yet again what a good buy he is.
He is a great asset to the club. He's, class player, he just helps the team so much.
On Sunday, they'll be aiming for their first at-home win when they take on Gibraltar Crescent. But on recent form, Politis would be happy to play all the games in Singapore.
Considering we're always winning away, it's like Singapore's home at the moment, but hopefully, we're sure we'll get a win this week for the home crowd.
Peter Adamson, 8 National News. At the Esplanade today was a small sample of a group that plans to shock the Darwin Cubs on Sunday. Gibraltar Crescent are taking things so seriously, they arrived a day earlier than usual.
I think a couple of the other clubs from Singapore have come down a bit late and just sort of jumped into it, but I think coming down early is definitely good, and I think it builds a bit of team morale as well.
Atkinson is a Kiwi, so he'll probably know how to mix it against the Aussies. As for his team, Atkinson believes all they need is a little bit of luck.
They're all pretty skillful and all very quick, and I think sometimes it just takes a bit of confidence from them, and they're away.
Another reason for the early arrival is to get used to the conditions, but humidity isn't likely to be a problem. The Singapore coach actually thinks Darwin is less humid than back home.
First, get used to the weather, and on top of it, just to build up some spirit, teamwork and team spirit for the game.
The Cubs took to the field sporting their new strip. The superstitious among them perhaps hoping for a change of luck at home. Gibraltar, of course, were hoping for no such change. The Cubs demonstrated early on they still had those finishing off jitters, but their second attempt was more successful, thanks to some classy footwork by Joe Barbaro. Cyril Keller was hoping for his second goal at home, but it wasn't going to be this one. As for Gibraltar Crescent, serious scoring attempts were rare, although there were some passages that sent a flutter through the ranks of the Cubs. But the story of lost opportunities continued for Darwin. By now it should have been at least 3-0, luck definitely with the Singapore goalie. But despite the Cubs' lack of finishing power, they were still easily the better side. They mightn't have come away with as many goals as they'd hoped, but at least they got the 2 competition points. Peter Adamson, National 9 News. The Darwin Cubs are a slightly bruised outfit today after yesterday's clash with Gibraltar Crescent. The Cubs won 3-1, but Joe Barbaro and Tony Gasparetto are under injury clouds for Saturday's game against Singapore Police. The second half produced some interesting goals. Then Nick Politis followed it up with a lob in one of life's most embarrassing moments for the Singapore goalie. Peter Adamson, 8 National News. Success at home last weekend, the Cubs' campaign in Singapore resumes tomorrow against the tough Police outfit. As the Cubs discovered against the Army, there are sides in the competition who aren't afraid of mixing it with their larger opponents. It could be more of the same tomorrow.
It's very physical, much like the Army side they've got over there. But if we just keep our composure and keep our discipline, it shouldn't be too much of a problem.
But a win alone won't be enough. If the Cubs are to be a premiership threat, they have to get that most basic part of the game right.
Yeah, we've got to really start putting the goals away. Our defensive record's fairly good. Only conceding 1 goal against the Singapore sides. We went fairly heavy against Perth, but we are very good defensively. It's just a matter of putting the ball away in the net.
The Cubs and Perth are still being well received in Singapore. Even though the locals are being forced to watch their home sides constantly beaten, there's a grudging respect for both Australian sides.
And with winning most of our games, you know, they really take to us over there, and they enjoy the type of soccer we play.
And the Darwin Rugby League
Second game going down 3-2 to Singapore Police. The Cubs were well in control of the match, but goalie Archie Christakos had a forgettable night. The Police 1-0 early before Cyril Keller equalised from a penalty. The Police hit back to go 2-1 before some individual brilliance from Hamilton Thorpe levelled the scores. In the second half, Police scored the match winner. The Cubs went away with some damaged pride, but confident of backing up next week for a win. Paul McLaughlin, 8 National News.
As Yvonne Goolagong-Cawley was leaving Darwin Airport, the Darwin Cubs' newest player, Carlo Taladera, arrived from Adelaide.
The wait was worth it!
The former Adelaide City player will use his experience to ease the Cubs' midfield pressure.
Hopefully pull the midfield, make it a bit stronger in there, and hopefully string a few more wins together.
But he doesn't have a big ego about his ability.
As just another player, I'm here to do a job for the team, not as an individual. So.
But Carlo is not just another player. He's tipped as a future Socceroo and has been approached to play for South Australia against Indonesia in July. Coming from a side that's just beaten England's Sheffield United, it's no wonder he's got big plans to break into the International League, starting in Asia.
I thought it'd be a good experience going to Singapore. You expose yourself to the Malaysian market, and who knows what can happen from there.
Carlo will train with the Darwin Cubs on Thursday night. On Friday he'll fly to Singapore. On Saturday he'll play his first game with his new team. Heather Stewart, 8 National News.
The Cubs were to take on the Tyrwhitt Soccerites, but the Muslim players in the side have refused to play on their sacred day. It means the Cubs' new star Carlo Taladera won't get a chance to show off his talents until next week, but it seems the cancellation could be a blessing in disguise.
So it will give the coach an opportunity to get them all together and regroup after the loss last weekend and prepare them for the game the following weekend against Jurong Town.
The Darwin Cubs are set to take on Jurong Town after a forced break from competition last weekend, when the Tyrwhitt Soccerites Muslim players refused to compete on their religious day.
I guess you tend to lose the momentum of games, but it makes the players even keener this week to show that they've got what it takes.
New Cubs players Carlo Taladera and Jason Petkovic will get their first run, but team captain Michael Makrilos is sorely missed, still out with injury. Heather Stewart, 8 National News.
Counter at Football Park, where the Cubs overcame their home ground hoodoo. They went one up midway through the first half when a header from Hamilton Thorpe found the back of the net. It was all downhill for the visitors for the remainder of the match, with the Cubs leading 4-0 at half-time. During the second half, Jurong Town's frustration became obvious. One player sent from the field, their tactics not stopping the Cubs from scoring a 6-0 victory. Adelaide import Carlo Taladera showed his class throughout the match, no more so than with this goal. Taladera, though, was disappointed by the attitude of the visitors.
But I was told not to expect too much from them. But the main thing I was disappointed with there was a few petty fouls that they made, you know, more of a mockery out of it.
Next week, the Cubs take on the much stronger Tauranga Baru, who they share second place with. Anthony Flannery, 8 National News.
A new club, new city and new flatmate for Jason Petkovic last month, when he came to Darwin to play for the Cubs.
I lacked a bit of match practice playing for Adelaide City, so during the off-season they recommended for me to play some matches so I can get that match fitness and match experience.
Petkovic followed in the steps of Adelaide City star midfielder Carlo Taladera. The Cubs making the most of its new talent.
It's a very good thing for us, you know, because they are experienced players, and you saw on Sunday they brought a different dimension.
Petkovic lives for soccer. He's left family and friends in home city Perth for football. His dream to be Australia's goalkeeper in the World Cup. And his goal could become a reality if speculation about his Socceroo potential holds any weight.
There's a difference between potential and actually being a Socceroo, so I have to have a lot of work to get there, I think.
Heather Stewart, 8 National News.
Have cemented their claim on the $40,000 runners-up position in the Singapore Premier League. In a do-or-die clash with rivals Tiong Bahru, dynamic striker Cyril Keller led the goal scoring in a 3-0 victory.
It was a must-win, and we showed good character, and we came away with the points, and I think everyone should be really happy.
Playmaker Tony Gasparito set the scene for Jerry Gregg's match-winning header in the dying minutes of the game. Michael Park, 8 National News. Meanwhile, in soccer, the Darwin Cubs take on the Singapore Army in a clash that's expected to be dominated by physical attacking. Defeating Army in their last encounter, former Adelaide City goalkeeper Jason Petkovic, who's yet to let a goal through, says their rivals will nevertheless have the geographic advantage.
They're coming from a more humid climate to a more cooler climate, so it's to their advantage rather than to our advantage, you know, so it could be a tough game for us.
The Sunday game gets underway at Marara Stadium from 4:30. Michael Park, 8 National News. Meanwhile, in soccer, the Darwin Cubs scored a convincing 2-0 victory over Singapore Army. Playmaker Tony Gasparito again featured up forward, setting up Taladera's winning header. Joe Barbaro heads home the Cubs' second, leaving Nick Politis to drive the last nail into the coffin of a battle-weary Army side. That's it.
In Singapore, the Darwin Cubs dominated Balestier United, Tony Gasparetto scoring after 14 minutes. But then the Cubs fell into a hole, the locals rallied and almost scored on a couple of occasions. 60 minutes later, newcomer Tony Machini scored with his first touch of the ball. By now, the Cubs had the game won, but the best was yet to come, this goal by Carlos Taladera. 3-0 to the Cubs. Paul McLaughlin, 8 National News. 8. In soccer, the Darwin Cubs handed Geylang International a 6-0 thrashing at Marara. Cyril Keller scored 2 in what was one of the Cubs' best performances this year. In an unusual move, stand-in goalkeeper David Miller took on his opposite number to score from a penalty. The Cubs play 2 matches in Singapore next week and will need to win both to cement second position on the ladder. Paul McLaughlin, 8 National News.
We're taking it very seriously because if we slip up, then the team could easily take our position. So it's no good doing half a job.